Paranormal Government Conscript by Austin Murre. I never wanted to join the Institute, nor did I ever want a government job. Who wants some dickhead bureaucrat to wave his finger in your face and decide your destiny? I was happy as a freelancer. I got to work from home, on my own time, and I got paid better than all my contract-bound slave colleagues. Yet, here I am. Heart racing, anxiety through the roof, and separated from my squad, all of whom I can only assume are dead. So much for an easy first assignment. Let me start from the beginning, right before we entered this godforsaken casino. The Institute always dispatches units in pairs. If it's anything more dangerous, a bigger team gets called in. Occasionally, some very secretive mission happens, and then senior agents are sent out to move the heavy loads. These agents are called Black Oxen, and are our equivalent to the Green Berets. There's always some gossip about these guys on the office floor, and they love it. Often, I would see them saunter around with a smug grin. Imagine how surprised I was when I slipped into the back seat of an old Cadillac and found one sitting there, waiting for me as my new partner. Svartberg was a short, thin man with flowing blonde hair, the upper half of which was tied into a man bun. He always wore a soft smile, and I had never heard him speak a word. He looked at me, shook my hand, then turned his head back to stare out the window. The driver adjusted his rearview mirror to make eye contact with me and said, "A rookie with a black oxen. You must have some serious potential." He then readjusted the mirror, his eyes escaping me for only a second before he turned around in his seat and offered me a handshake. He was a balding, fat, 40-something-year-old man. I couldn't help but realize that he looked exactly like the guy who owned the used furniture store in my old town. "My name is Abraham," he said, "and this is my partner, Scotch." Scotch, in the passenger seat, didn't turn to greet me. He just said, "We're late, Abraham. Again." Abraham turned back to the steering wheel and started up the old Cadillac. "You should learn some manners, Scotch. Remember your first ride along?" "Yeah, I do. I also remember how you drove us to the wrong address and kicked down the door during some kid's 5th birthday party. We were late that day, too." Abraham coughed into his fist, then said softly, "That was 8 years ago. Will you shut up about it?" "And we've been late to every site ever since." Scotch then turned to look at me. He was a 30-something-year-old with a sharp face. He looked like he should have been modeling for Time magazine's douchiest pretty boy. He just stared at me, his strong brow contorted in a skeptical gaze, dark blue eyes judging me. We maintained an uncomfortable eye contact for 10 counts, then he broke his gaze and turned back ahead. He didn't say a word to me, only to Abraham. "This rookie doesn't even want to be here. I can see it in his eyes." For a moment, there was silence in the car. During this silence, I realized that, douchebag or not, Scotch was right on the money with that observation. 2 months prior, I had some traumatic encounter with a shadowy demon woman, after which I was arrested, where they discovered that I could sense paranormal entities. My means of detection was panic attacks. That's the only reason I survived, trapped in a house with that demon for 3 days. Next thing I knew, I was reading classified documents, getting injections, forced to train endurance, although I passed all those tests with flying colors. Despite my aptitude, I never had the choice to say no. I was government property, just because I had proven myself useful. Why do they even hire guys like him anyway? I worked for the FBI for 5 years before I was transferred to the Institute, said Scotch. I wasn't hired, I then spoke up. You're right, I don't want to be here, especially not with someone who thinks he's better than me. Whoa, Scotch exclaimed. Rookie's got a big mouth. You better watch yourself, dimwit. Because we're the only things standing between you and real-life nightmares. You're not gonna let me die, I said confidently. You may not care about me, but you definitely care about your job. Imagine how bad my death would look on your record. He's got a point, said Abraham. Scotch let out a single huff of a laugh, nodded, then admitted, "Yeah, you're right. But what makes you so special anyway? They pluck you off the street, breeze you through training, then partner you with a black ox? What the hell is so special about you, huh?" I can feel when there's something unnatural nearby. I get anxious, panic attacky. "Oh, you're a canary. You know what a canary is?" "It's a bird," I answered. "Yeah, miners used to have canaries down in the mine shafts because these little birds could detect deadly gas. If a bird suddenly dropped dead, that meant that all the miners had to evacuate. So, basically, if you piss your pants, we know to run." "That's enough." Abraham's tone was suddenly strict and decisive. "I don't," began Scotch, before he was cut off again by Abraham. "Shut up. Don't scare the rookie." "I already told you, I don't want to babysit another kid who doesn't even want to be on the team. Why the hell do you keep accepting these assignments?" Scotch raised his voice. "And how do you think I feel, huh? I've been stuck with you as a partner for 8 years. No one wanted to be paired with the arrogant FBI transfer wannabe James Bond, but I took you under wing. So shut up." It was suddenly very quiet in the car. I couldn't help but feel like I was some toddler in the back seat, as his parents argued over how to raise me. It was very awkward for a moment. Abraham had just delivered a devastating gut punch. Now everyone regretted letting their emotions get the better of them. Then, in a thick Swedish accent, Svartberg said, "Murre survived 3 days in the Mariana confinement before burning it down from the inside." Both Scotch and Abraham then turned back to look at me. Their gaping mouths and shocked expressions fed my ego. Scotch then said, "All right, rookie, you're not a canary." After an hour and a half, we all stopped at a gas station to stretch our legs and get some snacks. Scotch got 2 protein bars, and Abraham got a ham sandwich. A wall of tall, thick pines surrounded this tiny pit stop in the mountains. We were the only patrons. I had always loved hiking through the peaceful pine forests. It was a hot summer day, but the gentle wooden pillars shielded us from the heat. It was one of those places where a deep breath could calm an anxious man. "How much longer until we get to the site?" I asked Abraham. "Another hour," he replied. Scotch, with half a protein bar in his mouth, chimed, "If we arrive at all." What with Abraham behind the wheel? "Where are we going anyway?" Abraham ripped the plastic covering his ham sandwich, took one sniff, pulled a disgusted expression, then tossed the rest of the sandwich in the bin. "I should have known," he muttered to himself. Scotch and I watched the Abraham sandwich interaction, after which Scotch turned to me and began explaining. "A casino popped up overnight in the middle of these mountains at the end of some dirt road." "And what are we going to do?" "Just scout and report. Nothing interesting." "Nothing interesting," I gawked. "How often do random buildings pop up in the middle of nowhere?" Scotch ripped a piece of his stale protein bar off with his teeth and began chewing laboriously. After a couple of hard smacks, he just shrugged. Eventually, Svartberg emerged from the store, a 6-pack of beer in both hands. He divided them among us and cracked one open. We got back in the car and began driving. With some food and beer in our belly, everyone was satisfied. Everyone was satiated and quiet. I took a moment to observe Svartberg, who never once took his eyes off his window. At some point, I had fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, Svartberg was gently shaking me awake. "Rookie is sleepy," said Scotch while undoing his seatbelt and exiting the car. Abraham and Svartberg did the same, and I followed after rubbing my eyes. We were in a big, empty parking lot in front of a bright casino. A massive LED light sign flashed neon colors. "Casino Castle, feel like a king," said the flashing sign. Scotch immediately pulled out a selfie stick with a 360-degree camera on the end and started filming the surroundings. Abraham put his hands on his hips and turned to me. "How do you feel, rookie?" "Me? I feel fine." "Great," he proclaimed as he started walking towards the front doors. I realized he wasn't interested in how I felt, only if I could sense any dangerous presence nearby. Scotch followed close behind with the selfie stick. He reminded me of some wannabe business influencer, the kind of influencer who made $100 with drop shipping and now sells a course. I turned to Svartberg, who just stood behind me with a little smile. Svartberg winked and made a gesture for me to walk. "Shouldn't I be following you?" I asked him. "It makes no difference," he responded with his Swedish accent. When at the front doors of the casino castle, everyone turned to me. I took a deep breath, took stock of my emotions, and then nodded. Abraham pushed the front door open and we entered the lobby. The lobby was decorated like a castle courtyard, with the ceiling painted heavenly blue and tall maroon drapes lining cobblestone walls. Luxurious couches thick enough to drown in looked inviting. A large red carpet slithered up the steps of a large marble staircase. There were kiosks for pinning cash and exchanging chips. There was also a security port with metal detectors and a rotating barrier activated with a thumbprint. A few slot machines were dinging and singing their addictive little noises in the lobby, giving us a taste of the greater casino, which echoed from up the stairs more excitable sounds. All this, and not a soul in sight. We took a moment to soak up the scene. Scotch walked into the center of the room, held the 360 camera high, paused for a moment, and then said, "Okay, let's run through this and get back to base." "What are we even doing here? I still don't understand." "Just cataloging, making sure everything is benign. 99% of all paranormal is, but that remaining 1% can cause serious damage." "Okay, but what if it is dangerous?" Abraham slapped me on the back and said, "You'll be the first to know. Just tell us if you start feeling queasy and we'll bolt back to the car." We all set off the metal detectors while passing through one by one. Scotch was the first to hop the barrier, then Abraham, then me, then Svartberg. At the top of the stairs, we were greeted by a labyrinth of slot machines, big enough to get lost in, all with the same sickening sounds to entice gambling addicts. I had heard that experts were hired to design confusing layouts of Vegas casinos, meant to keep the drunk and zombie-like players inside. Buildings with 5 walls and spiral designs, so the half-witted would wander towards the exit, only to sit back down at a table or slot machine. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up for a moment as I wondered what a paranormal casino could do. If a natural one was a Venus trap, then this could be a black hole. "Rookie," Abraham called to me. "Feel anything yet?" "Nothing much. At least, nothing serious." We continued walking through the serpentine slot machine labyrinth, soaking up the details. Everything was medieval themed. I never knew ghosts had a knack for interior design, I mused. "Ghosts? No," responded Abraham. "This is what we call a mirage. Basically an echo of what humans build. Imagine an AI reading millions of books and then pumping out something new. That's this. They come and go, often without purpose." "What do you even mean? Does this mean we're in a simulation?" "We don't know. I don't think anyone really knows. How could a bacteria conceive our world, or quantum mechanics? We're just floating around trying to understand the surface level stuff, trying to contain anything dangerous. The truth is, we don't understand in the slightest how any of the paranormal work, or if there is a purpose." Suddenly, my heart skipped a beat, and I froze and held my breath. The rest also stopped and turned their attention to me, all with wide eyes. Scotch looked ready to sprint, and Abraham put his hand on his coat as if to feel for a firearm. They all stared silently at me. "I feel something," I said quietly. My senses pulled in a direction. It was the feeling I had as a young child, as if I couldn't turn my back on an open doorway. But this was softer, less frightening and more curiously strange. I took a gentle step in the direction and searched my emotions. As we snuck our way through the maze, I realized it wasn't fear, but something more positive. I felt excited, as a child might when sneaking downstairs on Christmas morning. Beyond this wall of slot machines, there was an opening with live tables. and among the many empty tables, there was a person with his back to us. He had a glittering red vest and a Robin Hood hat. All four of us exchanged glances. "What do we do?" asked Abraham. "I don't know," I responded. "I feel really drawn to him. How often is the paranormal good-natured?" "Rarely, but when it is, it's amazing. Godlike." "What's the protocol for a situation like this anyway?" I asked. "Do you feel frightened?" "No, the opposite." Scotch then said, "It's your call, rookie. You're the canary." I then took a careful step forward. We crossed the casino floor, passing empty tables, chips and cards still laid about as if the players had just vanished mid-game. While passing a poker table, I took a peek at the cards. Nothing out of the ordinary, a 6 of clubs and an ace of hearts. I had expected this mirage to produce something else, something more interesting. So far, this was as realistic as it could be. We maintained a healthy distance from this card-dealing clerk as we all looped around. He paid no attention to us and focused intensely on shuffling his card deck. Our team all took positions around him at a distance of 6 meters, creating space and observation from all angles. He looked normal enough, except for the fact that he was doing insane shuffling card tricks. The shuffler then compiled his deck and dealt 4 pairs of cards. "Gentlemen," he said welcomingly, "take your seats." "What's the wager?" asked Scotch. The dealer looked up and smiled softly. "Well, since you don't know how to play blackjack, this round is practice." "You don't know how to play Jack?" Abraham asked Scotch. "I've watched movies. It doesn't look that hard." The first to approach was Svartberg. We all watched as he climbed atop his stool and leaned on the table. "Har duel?" he said in Swedish to the dealer, who replied with a smile. "Vi har allt." The dealer reached under the table and pulled out a frothy beer, which he placed before Svartberg. He then placed a colorful pink drink on the table, another beer, and a shot of Salmari, which I knew was meant for me. "Gentlemen, please, take your seats." We all approached, and I took my shot immediately. Scotch grimaced and said, "You like that stuff?" Without wiping my mouth, I replied, "Love it." Abraham took the pineapple garnish off his pink drink and ate it. "Ah, reminds me of the Caribbean. What's your name, dealer?" The dealer smiled and shook his head. "You know, people don't often care to ask that of me, or my abnormal entities." "Do you even have a name?" I asked. He looked up to the neon lights. I could see now that there was something off about him. He was too perfect. Cheekbones as sharp as a blade, a thick brow, glistening white teeth and piercing blue eyes. The kind of guy women would stop and gawk at. The kind of guy who would get 3 new modeling contracts while walking down the street to his local coffee shop. His outfit was stupid though. It should be a crime to put anyone in a red glitter blazer and Robin Hood hat. "I don't remember," he said after a moment of thought. "I may have never had one. It's so odd. For all the things I know about you fellas, I don't know anything about myself." Scotch leaned forward. "What do you know about us?" The dealer shuffled the cards with an unnatural swiftness, his fingers moving like a blur. "I know more about you than you know about yourselves." He dealt the cards, each agent receiving 2 face-up. I received a 6 and a 4. "Svartberg wants to retire," the dealer said suddenly. "But we all know agents don't retire." The 3 of us turned to Svartberg, who, for the first time, I had ever seen without a smile. He silently cocked his head and squinted. "Varför skulle du säga det inför mina kollegor?" He speaks in Swedish because he's trying to hide this fact from you. Svartberg never wanted to do this job. He was a conscript, much like Murre, which is why they were paired together, said the dealer before tapping Svartberg's cards, an ace of spades and a 9 of hearts. "I'm assuming you stand." When Svartberg failed to respond after a long, quiet moment, the dealer then turned to me. And before he could open his mouth to speak, I said, "Hit me." Thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed the story, and I'll see you next week for part 2. Goodbye.